Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. 7 persons rescued from collapsed building in Banana Island area of Lagos State. Outside Nigeria, Norway expels 15 Russian officials accused of spying under diplomatic cover. U.S. Appeals Court temporarily blocks a decision to halt government's approval of a Persian drug. My name is Femi Olanikpeku. Now the news in detail. The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, has said 7 persons were rescued from the collapsed building in the Banana Island, Ikoyi area of Lagos State. The 7-story structure under construction collapsed on Wednesday, but no lives were lost. While giving an update about the incident today, the Lagos Territorial Coordinator of the agency, Ibrahim Farin-Loye, said apart from the rescued victims, 1 person was rushed to a hospital where he's being treated. The NEMA chief also assured that the agency will not leave any stone unturned to ensure that nobody is left in the rubble. At least 8 people have reportedly killed in fresh attacks by bandits and Atakinje community in Zango-Katab local government area of Kaduna State. The latest attack is coming some weeks after a similar incident claimed 10 lives at Langsing community and the same local government area. President of Atiap Community Development Association, Sam Timbawok, told journalists that the gunmen invaded the community from a nearby bush at about 9 p.m. on Wednesday and started shooting sporadically on people's houses. He said the bandits attacked 5 houses, during which they shot 8 people to death, while 4 others sustained varying degrees of injuries. The Atiap president will disclose that the scene of the attack is located very close to a military checkpoint, however lamented over the late arrival of soldiers to the community after the attackers had committed the heinous crimes and left. Meanwhile, troops of Operation Forest Sanity have intercepted more than 2,000 rounds of various grades of ammunition being conveyed to bandits by Korea around Poliwire in the dreaded Birnin-Gwari local government area of Kaduna State. The State Commissioner for Internal Security and Home Affairs, Samuel Arwan, who disclosed this today, said the ammunition was concealed in different parts of black Toyota Corolla car. He added that the driver of the vehicle conveying the large quantity of ammunition meant for terrorists across the Birnin-Gwari general area was arrested by the troops. And outside Nigeria, Norway has expelled 15 Russian officials that it's accused of spying under diplomatic cover. Norway's foreign minister said Norway would not allow Moscow to use its embassy to carry out covert intelligence activities. It is the latest in a string of Russian expulsions since it launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year. A government statement said Norwegian authorities had monitored individuals over time before they were declared unacceptable or unwelcome. Norway said Russia poses the greatest intelligence threat to the country faces, that the threat is increasing against the backdrop of Europe's deteriorating security situation. Norway shares a 197-kilometer land border with Russia in the Arctic, and their relations have suffered throughout the Ukrainian crisis. And here in Africa, the Sudanese army says a paramilitary group headed by General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo has mobilized its forces in the capital Khartoum and other cities, a move that raises the prospect of confrontation with the armed forces. The army said in a statement today that members of the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, are also moving into the northern city of Marawi, and a clear violation of law that risks creating more tensions as Sudan goes through what it described as a dangerous juncture. The RSF said in a statement on Twitter that its operations in Marawi were part of national forces operating within the framework of the law and in full coordination with the leadership of the armed forces. The RSF, which operates under a special law and has its own chain of command, is a powerful former militia that has been accused of widespread human rights abuses, especially during the conflict in Sudan's Darfur region. The Dagalo, also known as Hemeti, climbed Sudan's political ladder by serving under former leader Omar al-Bashir, under whom the forces were recognized in 2017. And in Asia, a soldier has died of a gunshot wound at a military base in India's northwestern border state of Punjab. However, the Indian Army said it was not related to the killing of 4 soldiers there hours earlier. The Army said in a statement today that the soldier at Bathinda military station was thought to have shot himself yesterday evening. The soldier, who had returned from leave on April 11th, was rushed to a military hospital where he died of his injuries. Earlier on Wednesday, 4 soldiers were shot to death in their sleep in the barracks by 2 people. In the meantime, Southeast Asian nations have strongly condemned the Myanmar military's bombing of a village in the central Sanghain region that killed dozens of people, including children. A statement from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations today came a day after the Myanmar military confirmed the air attack on a ceremony held by the National Unity Government, a parallel administration for a unit of its People's Defense Force militia. United Nations, the United States, and others have already condemned the attack by the generals who seized power from elected governments in a coup in February 2021. According to reports, as many as 100 people were killed when fighter jets dropped bombs on the community hall on Tuesday morning. Qatar and Bahrain have announced that they had agreed to end a long-running diplomatic feud and re-establish relations. Bahrain in 2017 joined Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt in imposing a diplomatic blockade on Qatar. Qatar's foreign ministry said agreement and reconciliation was reached in talks at the Gulf Cooperation Council headquarters in Saudi Arabia. The neighbors decided to restore diplomatic relations between the 2 countries, according to the principles of the United Nations Charter. Bahrain's foreign ministry released a similar statement. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt imposed a blockade in 2017, accusing Qatar of supporting extremist organizations in the region and becoming too close to Iran. Leaked U.S. documents have revealed that disagreements in Russia's security apparatus led to the defense ministry being accused of undercounting casualties in the war in Ukraine. Russia has said very little publicly about the scale of its war deaths, but the files show the FSB security service claimed officials were not counting deaths of the Russian National Guard, Wagner mercenaries, and others. And Russia has already warned the leaks may be fake, deliberately dumped by the U.S.
A series of leaked reports purporting to be classified U.S. intelligence documents linked to the war in Ukraine has drawn skepticism and denials from U.S. spy agencies and several United States allies. These documents have been the subject of a media and political furore in recent days, putting the Pentagon on high alert as it tried to access and contain the leaks.
We're taking this very, very seriously. The president has been briefed on this. He will stay briefed on this. The Department of Defense is looking into this. They are leading an interagency effort here to review whatever national security implications might come out of all this. And the Department of Justice is leading a criminal investigation. So we're taking this very, very seriously. There is no excuse.
Photos of the classified files began circulating wildly in Russian social media channels last week. The files suggest Washington has been closely monitoring Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, as several documents describe private communications involving Mr. Guterres and his deputy. The documents contain candid observations from Mr. Guterres about the war in Ukraine and a number of African leaders. Meanwhile, one leaked document focuses on the Black Sea grain deal brokered by the UN and Turkey in July following fears of a global food crisis. It suggests that Mr. Guterres was so keen to preserve the deal that he was willing to accommodate Russia's interests, emphasizing Guterres' efforts to improve Russia's ability to export, even if it involves sanctioned Russian entities or individuals. His actions in February, according to the assessment, were undermining broader efforts to hold Moscow accountable for its actions in Ukraine. UN officials bristled at the suggestion that the world-stopped diplomat was being soft on Moscow, saying he wouldn't comment on leaked documents. One senior official said the UN was driven by the need to mitigate the impact of the war on the world's poorest. Russia has frequently complained that its own exports of grain and fertilizer are being adversely affected by international sanctions and has threatened at least twice to suspend cooperation with the grain deal unless its concerns are addressed. Although Russian grain and fertilizer are not subject to international sanctions, Russia says it has experienced difficulties with securing shipping and insurance. Another document from mid-February describes a frank conversation between Mr. Guterres and his deputy, Amina Mohammed. In it, Mr. Guterres expresses dismay at a call from the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, for Europe to produce more weapons and ammunition as a result of the war in Ukraine. The two also talk about a recent summit of African leaders. Amina Mohammed says that Kenya's President, William Ruto, is ruthless and that she doesn't trust him. It is well known that America is among a number of nations which routinely spy on the UN, but when the products of that espionage come to light, it's highly embarrassing and, for the world's leading diplomat, potentially damaging. The U.S. National Security spokesperson John Kirby has released a statement revealing fresh information of the activity of the U.S. military in Ukraine.
There's a small U.S. military presence at the embassy in conjunction with the defense attaché's office to help us work on accountability of the material that is going in and out of Ukraine. So they're attached to that embassy and to that defense attaché. They are not fighting on the battlefield. We are not providing enabling support on the battlefield.
UN officials are clearly unhappy with America's interpretation of Mr. Guterres' efforts, and they say that Mr. Guterres has made his opposition to Russia's war very clear. Temitope Ajijola Oluwaola, Western Spring Television News.
In other news, Russia's prominent opposition politician Alexei Navalny is suffering from a mystery ailment in jail and has lost 8 kilograms in a little more than 2 weeks. According to his spokesperson, an ambulance was called for Navalny overnight on Friday into Saturday at the maximum security IK6 penal colony at Molikovo. His spokesperson, Kira Yamish, said in a video clip on Twitter that an unknown stomach complaint had flared up on Friday, and prison doctors had treated him in the past by injecting him with medicine that they had refused to identify. When asked about the potential poisoning of Navalny, the Kremlin said it was not following the state of his health, which was a matter for the Federal Penitentiary Service. Navalny, who is serving combined sentences of 11.5 years for fraud and contempt of court, said via Twitter on Tuesday that he had been moved back into solitary confinement and forced to endure extremely hellish conditions. You're watching Spring Global and Western Spring Television. I'll be right back after this break.
Funmilayo Ransome Kuti was an educationist and advocate of women's rights. She was recognized for her vitriolic comments against colonial policy of taxation as it affected the Nigerian women. Bere, as fondly addressed by her women followers, Funmilayo championed the initiation of universal adult suffrage, which gave an unprecedented leeway for women to contest elective offices and power to exercise voting rights. Married to a foremost educationist and teacher, Israel Oladoto Ransom Kuti. The first president of Nigeria Union of Teachers, Fumilayo Ransom Kuti, was the mother of children who inherited her spirit of activism. Olufela Anbe Ololari, the former, a renowned musical legend. She was the first female student of Abeokuta Grammar School and the first female to own and drive a car in Nigeria. The award recipient of Member of Order of Nigeria MON and Lenin Peace Prize was born 25th October 1900 and was killed on 13th April 1978 by rampaging road soldiers in Lagos. Western Spring Television identifies Fumilayo Ransom Kuti as a watershed character in history. Dramatist, playwright, and icon of Yoruba thematic arts, Duro Ladipo was born December 18, 1931 in Osogbo, southwest Nigeria. His clergyman father christened him Timothy. His other names, Duro Dola, Duro Shomo, Duro Rike, reflected his persona and the circumstances that surrounded his birth. The legendary stage actor had in several public fora identified himself as one of the greatest abikus born to die in this world. Family records reveal how he was born and died 13 times. The intertwining names he bore thus lent credence to his spiritism. Duro Ladipo was one of the best known and world-acclaimed Yoruba dramatists to emerge from post-colonial Africa. His notable works, Obakoso, Obawaja, and Moremi, took him beyond Africa to several parts of the world. By the time Duro Ladipo died on 11 March 1978, Nigeria's first cultural ambassador had acquired a towering image as an artist whose works adorn the frontage of Trenchard Hall, University of Ibadan. Western Spring Television identifies Duro Ladipo as a major character in history.
Welcome back. Tanzania has deported one of South Africa's most wanted fugitives, the rapist and murderer Thabo Bester, who faked his death in prison and fled to the East African state. Bester was flown to South Africa in a specially chartered plane following his arrest in Tanzania last week. His girlfriend, celebrity Dr. Nandifa Magudumana, who was arrested with him, has also been deported, while her father has been charged with helping Bester escape from prison. Bester was on the run for a year after it was thought he died by setting himself on fire in his prison cell in the South African city of Bloemfontein. However, a manhunt was launched last month after a new post-mortem investigation revealed the body was not actually his. The case was postponed to 17th of April for a possible bail application. Elsewhere, a powerful storm that is charging towards Western Australia has intensified to a Category 5 system. Severe tropical cyclone Ilsa is expected to hit Port Hedland and the state's north later tonight. A red alert has been issued across the region, with thousands of people ordered to take immediate shelter. While Northern Australia is no stranger to cyclones, this storm is predicted to be the strongest to hit the region in 14 years. Residents, including some 15,000 people in Port Hedland, the world's biggest iron ore exporting port, have been ordered to shelter inside and stay away from doors and windows. In the United States, an appeal court has temporarily blocked a decision by a Texas judge to halt the government's approval of a widely used abortion drug. Mifepristone, one of two drugs used for medication abortions, was approved by the Food and Drug Administration and has been allowed for over 20 years. Abortion pills are now the most common method of ending a pregnancy, used in more than half of all U.S. abortions. This ruling means access to it will be maintained, but with some restrictions, which include a requirement to visit one's doctor to get the drug, and limiting its use to the first 7 weeks of pregnancy from the current 10. Critics of the ruling by Texas judge said it will open the door for challenges to other approved medicines in the U.S. and could also stifle development of future drugs. And moving on, a court has found a Peruvian former interior minister complicit in the 1988 killing of Hugo Bustillos, a journalist who investigated human rights abuses. The former minister, Daniel Uresti, has been sentenced to 12 years in jail. The court ruled that Uresti, who at the time was a military intelligence officer in the army, took part in the ambush and murder of Mr. Bustillos. Lawyers for the politician, however, said they would appeal against the verdict. Hugo Bustillos, a reporter for the weekly magazine Caritas, was killed at the height of the conflict between Peruvian security forces and rebels of the Maoist Shining Path group. The journalist reported on human rights abuses committed by both the rebels and the army in the Andean region of Ayacucho, one of the hardest hit by the armed conflict, which left 69,000 people dead or disappeared. 2 Hong Kong men have been arrested for disorderly conduct after they shot water guns at policemen during an event celebrating Songkran, the Thai New Year. Police said the duo, both in their 20s, used the festival as a cover to target law enforcers. Traditionally, during Songkran, water is splashed using buckets and squirt guns to drive away bad luck. Hong Kong has seen an erosion of freedoms since Beijing imposed the national security law in 2020. The critics say is designed to squash dissent and weaken Hong Kong's autonomy. The U.S. President Joe Biden has said it is a pleasure to be back as he met the Irish President, Michael Higgins, in Dublin. President Biden will spend most of today in the company of leading Irish politicians. He started his working day with a visit to the home of the Irish President in Phoenix Park. President Biden is inspecting a military guard of honor and a signed visitor's book. We'll also plant an oak tree to mark the occasion and ring the bell of peace.
Thank you all very much. And I'm not going home. I'm staying here. Isn't this an incredible place? All you American reporters. Looks just like the White House, right? Thank you all very much. And I'm not going home. I'm staying here. Isn't this an incredible place? All you American reporters. Looks just like the White House, right? Thank you all very much. And I'm not going home. I'm staying here.
And now to some sports stories. Kylian Mbappe has said he will still be a Paris Saint-Germain player next season, despite regular speculation over his future. As the French superstar also admitted he hopes to play for his country at the 2024 Paris Olympics. Mbappe signed a new contract with PSG at the end of last season to keep him at the Qatar-owned club until 2025. Although French media reports have indicated that the last year of that deal is optional and down to the player. Mbappe's comments come a week after he complained over the club's use of an interview with him as part of the season ticket advertising campaign before the club removed the footage. He joined PSG in 2017 from Monaco and still hopes to win the Champions League with his home city club. And the Premier League has announced that gambling sponsorship on the front of the league club's shirts will be withdrawn by the end of the 2025-2026 season after a collective agreement by the clubs. 8 of 20 top-flight clubs currently have shirts sponsored by gambling companies. A 3-year transition period will allow for existing deals to be completed without clubs facing penalties for cutting contracts short. Gambling sponsors on the front of football shirts have already been outlawed in Italy and Spain. And French football club Paris Saint-Germain, PSG, has denied reports that it launched an investigation into manager Christophe Galtier's alleged racist remarks during his time in charge at Nice last season. The reports emerged after news outlets quoted a leaked email from Nice's former director of football, Julien Fournier, in which he accused Galtier of saying that there were too many black and Muslim players in the Nice squad. Galtier has denied making the discriminatory remarks and said he will take legal action. A PSG spokesperson told Journalists today, there is no truth to reports that the club is investigating the alleged remarks. And before we end Spring Global, here is a recap of our top stories. The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, has said 7 persons were rescued from the collapsed building in the Banana Island, Ikoyi area of Lagos State. Norway has expelled 15 Russian officials that it had accused of spying under diplomatic cover. And in the United States, an appeal court has temporarily blocked a decision by a Texas judge to halt the government's approval of a widely used abortion drug. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. My name is Femi Olanikbekun. Good evening.